The sun is blinding, reflecting off the white silk of the hydrangeas and the polished wood of the string quartet's instruments. It is a perfect day. Every flower is in its place, every vow is memorized, every guest is seated, except for two. My wedding day was supposed to be a beginning, but as I stood behind the ornate garden doors, it felt like a funeral for my past. 2 seats in the front row stood out like open wounds. They were draped in cream fabric and tied with navy sashes, perfectly decorated for people who never intended to show up. My parents didn't just miss my wedding, they used their absence to cast me as a villain in their own twisted fairy tale. What would you do if the people who raised you tried to erase your existence just to save their own image? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you burn their script to the ground? The hum of the guests outside felt like static against the deafening silence of those 2 empty chairs. I had spent 30 years being the practical daughter, the quiet software engineer who stayed small so my sister Juliet could shine on magazine covers. I thought that if I built a beautiful enough life, they would finally choose to be part of it. I was wrong. The air was thick with the scent of eucalyptus and the pitying whispers of the crowd. I could feel their eyes searching for a mother and father who weren't there. I didn't forget to invite them. I didn't miss a detail. They chose to be forgotten so they could play the role of the neglected, heartbroken parents to anyone who would listen. A cold, surgical clarity settled over me as the music began. I realized that my parents didn't want a seat at my table. They wanted the power to flip the table over. In their world, image is everything, and the truth is just an inconvenience. They think they can rewrite this day into a story of a selfish daughter who cut them out. They think I'll stay silent to protect the family name like I always have. But they've forgotten one thing. I am a coder. I build systems that rely on logic and irrefutable data. I didn't forget them, and I'm going to make sure no one forgets what they did today. If they want a drama, I'll give them a masterpiece of accountability. The play is over, and I'm about to release the receipts. Status green. The code is running. My family is crashing. For years, I was the ghost in their machine. I was the intelligence they refused to acknowledge. Would you betray your own family if you realized you were just a tool in their shed? What would you do if someone tried to destroy everything you built while pretending you didn't exist? My name is Eleanor Vance, and while my sister Juliet's face was framed in gold over the fireplace on a Vogue cover, my state computer science championship trophy was gathering dust in a junk drawer. My parents, Arthur and Veronica, were the architects of appearance. To them, the world was a stage, and Juliet was their golden child, the perfect filtered lens through which they viewed their legacy. I was simply the functional component, the one who worked in the dark so they could stay in the spotlight. The reality of my life was a cold, brutal transaction hidden behind their polished marble exterior. While Juliet was jet-setting on a lifestyle I quietly subsidized with my software patents, I was building my own kingdom in silence. But the mask finally slipped during my honeymoon. It should have been the happiest week of my life, but it was interrupted by a text from Juliet that felt like a serrated blade. How could you forget to invite your own parents to your wedding? It was a public indictment. A calculated move to paint me as the ungrateful, cold-hearted daughter in front of their entire social circle. They wanted the world to believe I had abandoned them. They wanted to turn my joy into a weapon of guilt. But they forgot one thing. I don't deal in drama. I deal in data. I opened my laptop on a balcony in Greece, and the metadata didn't lie. I pulled up the digital invitation logs for the wedding. There it was, in cold, glowing pixels. Status. Opened. I could see the exact timestamp and the IP address from my father's study. They hadn't missed the invite. They had received it, read it, and deleted it to manufacture a crisis. They weren't confused. they were clinical. This wasn't a mistake. It was a hostile takeover of the truth. They wanted to humiliate me on the one day I was finally the center of my own world. A resource is only useful until it's exhausted, and sitting there in the Mediterranean sun, I realized the well had finally run dry. For years I believed that if I coded enough or stayed quiet enough, they would eventually see the value in my soul instead of just my bank account. But you cannot be seen by people who are blinded by their own reflection. They saw a daughter they could manipulate. I saw a family I was about to delete. I closed the laptop and felt a cold, surgical clarity settle over me. If they wanted to play the victims in a story I wrote, I was more than happy to give them an ending they never saw coming. The Vance family aesthetic was officially under audit.
The therapy room was quiet, smelling faintly of lavender and old books, a stark contrast to the digital chaos currently detonating in my pocket. Amelia, my therapist, watched me with a gaze that was both clinical and compassionate. I didn't cry. I showed her the metadata. I showed her the IP addresses. I explained the text Juliet had sent, the one that had turned my honeymoon in Greece into a forensic investigation. Amelia didn't call it a misunderstanding. She called it what it was: emotional gaslighting. She explained how my family wasn't just lying. They were trying to overwrite my reality to maintain their social standing. They were the architects of a false narrative, and I was supposed to be the silent laborer who helped build it. But sitting in that chair, I felt a shift in my internal architecture. I wasn't going to be the victim in their play anymore. I opened my laptop and created 2 folders that would become the foundation of my response: wedding receipts and the gaslight timeline. While I was mapping out the truth, the family group chat was erupting with a violence disguised as grace. My mother, Veronica, had begun a campaign of graceful victimhood on social media. She posted a photo of the family standing in front of the fireplace, Juliet looking radiant and me conspicuously absent from the frame. The caption read, "Sometimes the hardest part of being a parent is learning to love from a distance when doors are closed without explanation." It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It was designed to trigger a specific response from their circle: pity for them, and judgment for the cold daughter who forgot her parents on her wedding day. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications as family friends and cousins chimed in with sending love. And, "I can't believe Eleanor would do that." The suspense was a tightening knot in my chest. They were building a fortress of lies, and they were doing it in real time, confident that I would stay silent to protect the family name. The internal monologue in my head was no longer a frantic plea for acceptance. It was a cold, calculated countdown. I watched the messages fly by. Juliet's faux sympathetic, "She's just always been different, Mom." And my father's stoic, "We'll get through this as a family." They thought they were in control because they held the microphone. They didn't realize I was the one who controlled the entire sound system. I wasn't just collecting emails. I was building a chronological map of every lie told over the last decade. I cross-referenced the wedding invite open status with the timestamps of their public claims that they were never notified. I tracked the IP addresses of the devices that had accessed my wedding website. The evidence was surgical. I felt an emotional peak of pure, icy resolve. The disheveled daughter was about to perform a forensic audit on their souls. The pacing of the betrayal was accelerating. Veronica's next post was a video, a staged moment of her accidentally finding an old photo of me as a child, her voice cracking as she wondered where she went wrong. It was the ultimate smug moment. She believed she had successfully buried me under a mountain of public shame. She didn't realize that in the world of technology, nothing is ever truly buried. I sat in Amelia's office, the glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes, and I didn't feel the need to argue. I didn't need to send a frantic text or make a tearful phone call. I was a coder. I knew that you don't fix a bug by screaming at the screen. You isolate the code, you identify the corruption, and you delete it. My family was the corruption, and I was seconds away from hitting the execute button on the truth. The silence I had maintained for decades wasn't a sign of peace. It was the quiet before a total system failure. I sat in my home office, the blue light of the monitor reflecting off the sharp edges of my wedding ring, and looked at the gaslight timeline one last time. My mother's tearful videos were still trending in our family circle, painting me as a daughter who had abandoned her blood. I didn't reach for the phone to argue. I reached for the send button. I didn't blast it on social media. I sent the compressed PDF, complete with the open status logs, the IP address maps, and the deleted email receipts, to Aunt Evelyn. In the Vance family, Evelyn was the keeper of the high society keys, the woman whose opinion dictated the weather in our social circle. If you wanted a fire to spread, you gave her the match. The ripple effect was instantaneous and visceral. Within 20 minutes, the family group chat, which had been a non-stop stream of poor Veronica messages, went dead silent. The suspense was a heavy electric hum in the air. I watched the scene by icons tick up one by one. Aunt Evelyn didn't call my mother. She called her sisters. The truth began to circulate like a virus through the very networks my parents used to sustain their facade. I could almost feel the temperature dropping in my parents' polished living room as the first wave of questioning texts hit their phones. The quiet one had finally spoken, and I didn't use adjectives, I used data. The narrative of the ungrateful daughter was being overwritten in real time by the cold, undeniable reality of their clinical manipulation. The emotional peak came when my phone finally rang. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was my father, his voice stripped of its usual senatorial boom, sounding small and hunted. "Eleanor, why would you do this to your mother? This is a private matter." I didn't let him finish. "It stopped being private when you used my wedding as a pure stunt for your victimhood, Dad," I replied, my voice steady and devoid of the old tremors. "I didn't leak a lie. I leaked the truth. If the truth destroys your image, it's because your image was built on a scam." I hung up before he could respond. The architecture of their lies was folding inward, a controlled demolition of the golden family myth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one gasping for air. I was the one controlling the oxygen. The silence following the leak was a fragile peace that lasted exactly 48 hours before Juliet launched her counteroffensive. In a move of staggering clinical narcissism, my sister announced her own flash wedding for the following month. When the mood board dropped on her social media, my heart stopped. It was a literal carbon copy of mine. From the specific shade of Mediterranean teal to the exact font on the menus, she wasn't just planning a wedding. She was attempting to overwrite my memories, turning my unique joy into a generic family template. The smugness radiated from her posts. She believed that by being louder and more expensive, she could erase the forensic truth I'd shared. Then the physical manifestation of their entitlement arrived at my doorstep. A thick cream-colored envelope containing $2,000 in cash and a note in my mother's elegant cursive script. It didn't say, "I'm sorry." It said, "Show up for the family image. Be the daughter we need you to be for the cameras, and let's put this unpleasantness behind us." The bribe was the final insult, a cold price tag placed on my dignity. But they forgot that while they were busy managing a social circle, I was learning how to manage the world. I didn't take the money and I didn't stay quiet. Instead of a private argument, I drafted a viral anonymous post for a major pro-revenge forum, detailing the chronicles of the copycat bride and the billionaire bribe. I included redacted screenshots of the metadata and the cream envelope. The internet, with its collective hunger for justice, did the rest. Within hours, the story moved from a niche forum to the mainstream. The world began to side with the invisible daughter. The first crack in the Vance empire of image became a canyon when Juliet's high-end wedding planner, a woman who valued her own brand's integrity, publicly resigned, citing unethical family dynamics, revealed in the viral logs. The suspense reached a fever pitch as the golden child's curated life began to bleed out in the comments sections of her own sponsors. My parents' charity foundation started receiving inquiries not about their philanthropy, but about their moral clause regarding the treatment of their own blood. I watched from my screen as the invitations were rescinded and the likes turned into questions they couldn't answer. They had tried to buy my silence for $2,000. They were about to find out that the truth cost everything they owned. I wasn't just the sister who coded in the dark anymore. I was the one who had finally turned on the high-intensity floodlights, and for the first time in 30 years, the Vances had nowhere left to hide. The end wasn't a shouting match, it was a profound ringing silence. When the wax-sealed invitation to Juliet's redemption wedding arrived, A desperate attempt to fix their public image. I didn't even open it. I tossed it into the recycling bin without a second thought. I was finally done being an uncredited extra in a play that was never written for me. I chose a different path, leaving the corporate grind to found Vance Analytics. I took the one thing they couldn't steal, my technical mind, and turned it into a sanctuary of data and truth. The final act of their entitlement came in a thick envelope from my father. He actually sent an invoice for family dispute resolution, as if the years of gaslighting were a billable service. I didn't get angry. I felt a cold, surgical amusement. I took the original $2,000 bribe check they'd sent me, stapled it to his invoice, and mailed it back with a one-page counteroffer. A permanent non-disclosure agreement regarding my life. It was the last time I would ever interact with their ledger. The contrast was stark. While Juliet's wedding eventually happened in front of half-empty pews and fading socialites, Dean and I were in our new Seattle office, looking out at a horizon that finally belonged to us. I watched their social status evaporate in real time, replaced by the weight of their own hollow choices. I spent 30 years as the background noise in their lives, the quiet static they ignored until they needed something. Now, I realize that the person in the background is often the only one who truly understands the mechanics of the room. I'm not the ghost in their machine anymore. I'm the one who sets the frequency. Greed for attention and image is a bottomless pit, a hollow hunger that no amount of filtered perfection can ever truly satisfy. For 30 years I tried to fill that void with my silence and my service, only to realize that my family didn't want a daughter. They wanted a prop. They needed a static figure to stand in the background of their curated lives. A functional ghost who would pay the bills and take the blame without ever making a sound. But the problem with props is that once they start speaking for themselves, the entire play falls apart. I spent so much time feeling guilty for betraying them, but the truth is much simpler. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped lying for them. I stopped holding up the heavy, gilded frame of their reputation when I realized they would gladly let it crush me if it meant the photo looked better. Integrity is the only thing that survives a forensic audit of the soul. When the high society invitations stop coming and the likes on social media fade away, you are left with the reality of who you actually are and how you treated the people who loved you. If you are currently sitting in that same quiet darkness I inhabited, being gaslit, being used, or being treated like a liability, stop looking for their approval. It is a currency they will never pay out. Instead, start looking for your receipts. Start documenting your worth and protecting your peace with the same intensity they used to protect their image. Boundaries aren't selfish. They are the blueprints of your survival. You are allowed to be the lead architect of your own life, even if that means leaving the house your parents built. Have you ever been the unseen child in a family that cared more about the photo than the feelings of the people in it? Have you ever had to choose between your family's aesthetic and your own sanity? Reclaiming your truth is a lonely road at first, but it's the only one that leads to freedom. Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the moments we decided to stop being background noise and started setting our own frequency. Your truth deserves to be heard, not just managed.